So Kratos, the literal god of war, spent the entire game worried about protecting his son who apparently can't die anyway. Talk about unnecessary parental anxiety. Maybe next game should just be called God of Overprotective Parenting. But seriously, Atreus surviving absolutely everything thrown at him raises some major questions. Either this kid has the most ridiculous plot armor in gaming history, or there's a legitimate reason he walks away from situations that would kill even gods. Ancient Norse secrets might explain his mysterious invulnerability. Today we're figuring out which one it is, and the answer might completely change how you see the future of God of War. Let's talk about the weird pattern that keeps showing up with Atreus throughout both God of War games. The kid defies death at every turn. Now, I'm not talking about gameplay mechanics where Atreus can't be killed. I'm talking about actual story moments where, by all accounts, this boy should be dead, buried, and forgotten, but somehow he remains unscathed. Remember, in God of War 2018, when Atreus fell deathly ill, the kid was literally dying before our eyes. Kratos, despite being a god-killer who's decimated everything in his path, stood helpless at his son's bedside. You could see the raw fear in his eyes, something we rarely witness from the ghost of Sparta. He even had to reclaim his old blades of chaos just to have a chance at saving him. Even Freya, a goddess with incredible healing abilities, seemed genuinely worried Atreus wouldn't make it. Yet, somehow, the boy recovered completely. Then there's that moment when Atreus got caught in Kratos' Spartan rage, a power that has torn gods apart. Thor's sons Modi and Magni, full-blown gods who were supposedly destined for greatness, fell to Kratos far easier than it takes to put Atreus down for good. Ragnarok amplified this survivability pattern significantly. Atreus takes direct hits from Thor, absorbs Odin's magic blasts, and walks away from the literal end of the Norse world. There's that scene where he's crushed under massive rubble, enough to flatten any being, yet emerges barely bruised. What makes this fascinating is how deliberately the developers portray these moments. Game director Eric Williams has stated that Atreus represents something unique in the God of War universe, and that his journey is just beginning. These are calculated hints about his nature. The prophecy walls, showing Atreus/Loki surviving deadly events, aren't background decoration. They're key foreshadowing. The giants named him Loki because they recognize something essential about who he is. When you examine all these moments together, a clear pattern emerges. This isn't lazy writing. It's deliberate storytelling. The boy who can't be killed prophecy is literal. The games consistently demonstrate that Atreus possesses an immunity to death that makes him extraordinary even among gods. The prophecy walls weren't just telling us Atreus' name was Loki. They were revealing his very nature. In Norse mythology, Loki is literally described as someone who cannot be permanently removed from existence. The original myths portray Loki as having incredible regenerative abilities, surviving his lips being sewn shut with magical thread and later escaping imprisonment where he was bound with his son's entrails and had venom dripped on his face. Like a phoenix constantly rising from its own destruction, Loki always returns for Ragnarok. Remember, when Jormungandr immediately recognized Atreus during their first meeting, Mimir was completely baffled, saying, "The serpent recognized you. Never seen that before." This wasn't just a cute Easter egg. In Norse mythology, Jormungandr is Loki's son who gets thrown back in time during Ragnarok. The serpent recognized Atreus because, in some timeline or future, Atreus had already lived as Loki and become his father. This suggests something mind-blowing. Atreus may have already lived through multiple versions of his life. Throughout both games, Mimir drops several hints about this when discussing Loki's role in prophecies, mentioning that the cycle always finds a way to continue, and that some beings are woven into the fabric of fate itself. These aren't throwaway lines. They're direct clues about Atreus' true nature. The runes found throughout Jotunheim tell an even deeper story. Several inscriptions specifically reference the one who returns and he who cannot be undone. One particular mural in the Jotunheim temple shows a figure resembling Atreus walking through what appears to be multiple different worlds or realms. suggesting his existence transcends a single timeline. This connects perfectly to those moments when Atreus displays unexplainable powers, instinctively understanding ancient Jotnar language, communicating with animals, transforming into a wolf during his rage state. These are manifestations of his Loki nature bleeding through powers remembered from other cycles of existence. And there's something fascinating about Odin hunting the giants to extinction. We initially thought it was just to prevent Ragnarok, but what if Odin knew something special about Loki's connection to death itself? What if he understood that this particular being couldn't be permanently killed, making him the ultimate threat to Odin's plans for eternal rule? What happens to a franchise built on death and vengeance when you introduce a character who can't actually die? Santa Monica Studio hasn't just set up an interesting plot point. They've potentially created a fundamental shift in how future God of War games will function at their core. Think about it. Atreus' immortality transforms what's possible for the series going forward. Game developers don't make choices this significant without major plans for how they'll use them, and the implications are massive. This creates serious storytelling challenges. How do you maintain tension when your audience knows a character can't die? Most games rely on the threat of death to create stakes, while Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time use time manipulation to explain respawning as a game mechanic. God of War appears to be building immortality into the actual character lore, making it a feature of the story rather than something players ignore. But what does this mean for how we'll actually play these games? Imagine playing as Atreus, where death becomes a strategic choice rather than a failure state. You could deliberately die to trigger new abilities, access different realms, or solve puzzles that require sacrifice. Death becoming a tool rather than an obstacle would revolutionize action gaming. This also completely disrupts the cycle of patricide that's been central to God of War since the original games. Kratos killed his father Zeus, continuing a pattern that began with Zeus killing Kronos, reflecting the endless cycle of vengeance in classical mythology. But an unkillable son fundamentally breaks this pattern, re-examining the series' central themes in ways we've never seen before in gaming epics. Santa Monica Studio has a history of completely flipping the script on player expectations. Remember when they transformed Kratos from a revenge-obsessed killing machine into a contemplative father figure? This immortality angle could be their next big reinvention, as they've repeatedly stated they're not afraid to completely redefine what a God of War game can be. So what's the bottom line here? Atreus isn't just another character, he's a game changer in the most literal sense. Everything points to him being fundamentally unkillable, making him potentially the most important figure in the entire franchise. Imagine the gameplay mechanics around a protagonist who uses death as a strategy, accessing other realms, gaining abilities with each death, or manipulating time through his unique connection to existence. When Santa Monica Studio makes their next announcement, remember this prediction. These breadcrumbs were laid throughout 2 games for a reason. What do you think? Could Atreus completely redefine God of War? Share your theories below, especially if you've spotted clues we missed. The saga, we know, is evolving into something entirely new.
Hear that? All we have to do is call him with Gjallarhorn when we're ready. Let's head back to Moose Spawn. We can take the Mystic Gateway back from there.